And joining us now is the radio play-by-play announcer of the Nashville Predators, Pete Weber. Thank you so much for joining us here today, Pete, a longtime announcer for the Predators. And I've known you for a little over a year or so now. Again, thank you so much for coming on to our podcast, the W&Q Hockey Podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, thank you, guys. And I look forward to conversations like this, much like another guy does these a lot, a guy named Mike Emmerich.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And he actually
everyone missed him,
did
especially
retire
this year.
recently. Yep.
We exchanged texts yesterday because I sent him a picture of the Fort Wayne Komets from years ago, which was the team that really attracted him to the game to begin with.
There you go.
You got that right. Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's like, our Mike here said he'll be sorely missed this season, but it's always good to hear from Doc. He's a friend of ours as well, and always good to hear about him and how he's doing. So, first and foremost, speaking about Doc Emmerich and everything, but also for you growing up, who's your inspiration to become a broadcaster, Pete?
I'd have to say that nice little, and I don't have it any longer, but there was a great Zenith tabletop radio. I grew up in West Central Illinois between Peoria and the Quad Cities. And in those days, the 50s and 60s, virtually every sports team was carried on a 50,000 watt, usually clear channel station. So I could bring in so many since sports was my passion. But I'd have to say, listening as a 7-8-year-old, I was always following Stan Musial and the Cardinals, so I was attracted to KMOX. And I heard these two gentlemen, Harry Carey and Jack Buck, obviously having so much fun doing what they were doing. Later, I found out they got paid for doing that. Boy, what a combination that is. You're doing something you love and you get paid for it. That means the slash through the equals, not a job, right? So that's what attracted me initially, but I was I was listening to the WCCO in the Twin Cities, Twins and Vikings games, Halsey Hall, and those gentlemen doing those games. Even WTMJ in Milwaukee, and this will age me because it was Milwaukee Braves games back in those days before they moved to Atlanta in '66. In St. Louis as well, Jack Buck was actually the first voice of the hockey St. Louis Blues. It was the next year they brought Dan Kelly down from Canada to do those games. So I heard Ernie Harwell doing the Tigers. But Lloyd Pettit doing the Chicago Blackhawks was just an incredible inspiration to me, listening to how he brought the emotion of the game to his broadcast. And then later on, I come to Nashville. Lo and behold, our farm club, and still to this day, the Milwaukee Admirals, though when we started, they were in the International Hockey League, not the AHL as they are now. And who was the owner of that Milwaukee Admirals club? Lloyd Pettit and his wife. So at training camp, I would get to sort of be the poodle sitting at the knee of Lloyd Pettit, getting all of his old stories in, because even when he was doing the Blackhawks, he was being limoed down from Milwaukee to the old Chicago Stadium to do his games. So there was a great connection there with Milwaukee and the old stories. And, I can still hear him going, Bobby Hull down the left wing side, he shoots and scores. And that was the sort of thing that really, and you heard the living, breathing, and shouting building that Chicago Stadium was in those days. And that was just incredible to me.
I'm sure it was, back then. And I think it's safe to say you could probably compare it to what Nashville has been like the last several years, as their atmosphere has been unbelievable. And Mike, I want to segue to you and your question for Pete here. Go ahead with your question about that incredible 2017 Cup run.
It was, and it's not just that. It was that fact that it was kind of a smaller market team that you never really saw in there. That's what made me attracted so much to Nashville and just this fan base and everyone just getting in on everything Nashville was doing. And to me, I want to ask you, what was some of your favorite memories from that year, just from the playoffs or the season itself?
It's really, it all blends together in many ways. And there was the year before that where I thought this could really be something. and that was in 2016, Game 4 against the San Jose Sharks, and it goes into triple overtime. Number one, we started the game for television at 8:45 Central Time. So you're in triple overtime. We are past 1 a.m. as the game is coming to its conclusion. And I was thinking of Steve Levy with this multiple overtime game going on and wondering where Darren Pang and Steve Levy were at that particular point in time. But then Mike Fisher scored the game winner at like 1:06 in the morning and go back to San Jose, all even up in the series. Ultimately, losing that series in 7 games, but still, that was the idea. And that year was when the All-Star game was here, and the All-Star game turned downtown into like hockey's version of Woodstock. We didn't have Maxi Asger's farm, perhaps, but we had that whole campus of about 4 intersecting city blocks working together. It was music on the outside, hockey on the inside, and just a swarm of people. And I think that's when it really began to take hold. And this is coming after 2007. It looked like the team might be moved by a guy who had made his fortune in cell phones.
Right.
There you go. So again, in all that atmosphere, again, like we were talking about, like Chicago back in the good days for them, and it was electrifying. And I remember I did ask you when I first talked with you about a year or two ago, what was it like as a broadcasting experience during the Stanley Cup Finals? You were talking about the radio decibels and being so loud you couldn't even really hear yourself think. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I was trying to find if I had my decibel meter out here in handy, but I was measuring both what it was like in the playoffs in Chicago and here, and upstairs where I broadcast from, we were pushing 120 decibels. Now that is not that I was pushing it; that's what the noise level was like up there, and that's equivalent to a jet engine being in your driveway and generating all of that. So what is it like down lower where it's really loud? Yeah. So I got another decibel meter from my wife, and it was poised around 130. So it's really like what they have done here is take Southeastern Conference football fans and move them inside to chant that way for hockey. And that the noise, I have to be very honest with you here. I'm glad I wear broadcast headphones. That probably saves me from some ear damage. And here's the other thing. For our radio engineer, he doesn't need to use any effects, really. It all comes in through our microphones. So in a way, that makes it easier for him. But then remember, I'm coming from doing also in the summer times minor league baseball. And I was sometimes where you could hear what every fan was saying in the stands at a minor league baseball game compared to the 17,113 at Bridgestone Arena.
Yeah, that must have been truly something. So speaking about Nashville, though, like how did you even end up getting there? Because I know, like you said, that you starting in your early days, that you grew a lot of inspiration from Jack Buck and and the Cardinals and Stan Musial, and you eventually work your way into Nashville for the Predators, play-by-play radio announcer.
Yeah. Okay. Here it was. I was traveling into Nashville for 10 years in the summers doing Buffalo Bison's baseball. And they were in the same league with the Nashville Sounds, the American Association, which the name exists, but that league as it was, we all know minor league baseball has been torn asunder. But so I came here for 3 or 4 trips per summer, depending on what the schedule rotation was that year. So I became somewhat familiar with the people here. And I knew that at that point in time, they had ECHL team here that was playing down an old municipal auditorium, which was about 180 feet by 83 feet wide for their rink. And at one point, they didn't have glass. They had like chicken wire up along the sides. Wow. So they had guys like Trevor Jobe, big-time scorer here. They also had a goaltender named Mano Rayon, who my broadcast partner here, Terry Crisp, coached with the Tampa Bay Lightning when she made one save on Brendan Shanahan and got a $50,000, I think it was an O-Pee-Chee, or maybe it was an upper deck card deal for that one great shot. So then I was upstairs in my home in Buffalo, and very sophisticated at this point in time. My home office, I had the Prodigy computer service online there with maybe a 400 baud modem. So in other words, stuff that we couldn't do this with right now because it wouldn't be enough bandwidth. But all of a sudden, there came a story in the spring of '97 that the NHL was awarding provisional franchises, and they had to go on from there, to Atlanta, Nashville, Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Columbus, Ohio. And my wife's family had moved from Columbus to East Tennessee in the 80s. And I said to Claudia, what do you think this would be like for us at the holidays if we were in Nashville and only had to go over to Knoxville, as opposed to the 11 or 12 hours it might take to get ourselves down from Buffalo to Knoxville? So she said, yeah, that's a great idea. So I was able to locate the founding owner of the team, Craig Leopold, on there in Racine, Wisconsin, and FedExed my stuff to him the next day, and then kept following up for the next year. And finally, by August of '98, when the puck was first going to drop, for an exhibition games in September of '98, I was under contract to move here. I was fortunate in that regard. The man named Director of Communications here had been in PR with the Buffalo Sabres when I was doing their games and their cable hosting, Jerry Helper. And he was the one who thought that Terry Crisp and I would have pretty good chemistry, knowing us both. He knew Terry from when Jerry was with the Tampa Bay Lightning and Terry was their first coach. So that's really kind of how all that came together.
And it's safe to say that you guys have really formed that great chemistry ever since then.
Yeah, well, as a matter of fact, his sister-in-law is such a great Maple Leafs fan, and we had to try to console her after they blew that 5-1 lead
I did see
the
that.
Toronto Maple Leafs. And I just texted out again this morning, the rematch is tonight, so let's be careful.
Yeah.
Mike, go ahead with your next question. I know you had
Actually,
one.
I was going to go back to what I was saying before, but just kind of this year in the NHL with no fans, do you think that kind of, not so much that just feel different when you're, say, home with Nashville versus what you saw, like really rowdy and everything? Do you think they kind of miss that as kind of a way to get them going into games at times?
There's no question. Now, we've had about 2,000 to 2,500 fans the last several home games. And there is a highly contested lottery system to get into that group of 2,000 to 2,500 fans. So they very much miss it. And so, and to see what we got, the postponements in Dallas earlier this week, where they allow about 4,500 fans in. And what was it? It was so crazy when we resumed play in January, where we had Arizona leading the league in an average attendance. And that's because they didn't have the restrictions from their local governments that we have had elsewhere. And it's also curious for me in Tampa. And now here we are, Tampa's in our division now with all the reconfigurations, that they decided not to have anybody in at the outset while they are playing host to the 2 years ago NBA champion Toronto Raptors, playing their games in the very same building. So everybody is scrambling. We know that our schedules are in pencil, not in ink, because we had, and that's happened for us this week too. And I believe that our two postponements in Dallas for Monday and Tuesday, not yet rescheduled, at least what I've seen online here this morning, those are the first of the postponements. And there have been over 30 of them that are not COVID related. This is weather and or FEMA related than anything else.
Right.
Yeah, which is, again, just hard to believe. You would assume that it's something COVID related, but I mean, it's kind of a good news, bad news situation where, again, it's good news that it's not COVID, but still, of course, bad news because it's just more rescheduling.
And yet, in a way, it is COVID related because electricity has probably spoiled, lack of same, has probably spoiled a bunch of the vaccines in Texas because of the storage difficulties and the loss of power.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. So kind of all fits in one umbrella. Yeah.
But I think we can kind of transition a bit here. But the reason why we thought you came on, because since the off season, Jeff and I have been doing these mini series on different teams, doing deep dives on each of them. So this time we're on Nashville. So we thought, why not get
Let's
you
do our
on
deep
here?
dive.
Yes. So I actually had a question just on because it seems like Nashville was pretty busy this kind of off season, making a couple moves here and there. What do you think so far of what you've seen this year has been like the biggest move and like the biggest key move for them going forward?
The biggest move. Okay. Probably just trying to get guys on the roster who make the team tougher to play against. So I'd say the first of those was probably defenseman Mark Borowiecki coming down from the Ottawa Senators, who really does make it uncomfortable to go to the front of the net. I'll just put it that way. And but then there's guys like Richardson coming on to play a checking line center, elevating Matthew Olivier. And now here's Matthew Olivier, and you say, well, he's a Quebec kid, right? Well, yes, basically, but his father was playing for the Mississippi Seawolves in the ECHL. So we have, I believe, our first native of Biloxi, Mississippi, playing in the NHL right now. And he is very difficult to play against, but right now he's been called the Biloxi Bull on our broadcast. But he is difficult to play against, and if you don't believe me, ask Luke Shen, who had a pretty good battle with him after opening face-off a few weeks ago. But so many of these guys are on the injured list. That includes Ryan Johansson.
Yep.
Matthias Ekholm has been a very steady defenseman here. He's on the injured list. Ryan Johansson may return by this weekend. The series coming up in Columbus Thursday, Saturday. If not then, next week in Detroit against the Red Wings again. So we'll see how that works out. But I think when you look at the record, you can say not much truly has worked out to this point in time. They are below, and I hate to get deep in analytics here, but they're below expected goals for.
Right.
And I think the big reason for that is the shots they generate have not been going on net.
Okay.
I like to simplify that as much as I can.
Mm-hmm.
Well, which actually,
if you look at some of their games in a little bit that I've kind of looked and trying to researching it, looks like you've had a couple like close games here where it's like if you had a couple like bounces go your way, maybe these outcomes could be a little different.
Yeah, in my old days of chatting post-game with Barry Trotz, the phrase puck luck would come up. And
there it is.
One of the dangerous phrases for a broadcaster, puck luck. I want to be careful to enunciate that as we go ahead. But the same thing that we had with Coach John Hines the other morning. He was talking about Yakov Trenin, and he was going, he's a real, and I said, shift disturber? Yes, that's the phrase, shift disturber, when he goes out there.
Yeah, and speaking about Yakov Trenin, I honestly, just, again, for those fans who aren't necessarily that honed in on the Nashville Predators, they know Ryan Johansson, they know Luke Kunin, Mikael Granlund, Victor Arvidsson, Matt Shane, Phil Forsberg, Pekka Rinne. But one of the few players I feel like not enough fans around the league know about is Yakov Trenin. What, in your opinion, makes Trenin such an effective young player?
He's got very good hands from in tight. And I've seen him in combination going back to when he got his chances last year. He played a lot with Matt Duchene. Duchene would put the puck on his stick in an advantageous position, and he would score. And then the other usage of his mitts. I think some people will probably recall last season a game with the Boston Bruins where he buckled the big man, Zdeno Chara. I've never seen Chara so adversely affected by someone else's punch. But Trenin got him on the so-called, is it a mythical button? I don't think so. But he hit him right on the button there. And when you stagger the big man, that brings a lot.
You're doing something right.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Kind of like we just had the 31st anniversary of the upset of Mike Tyson at the Tokyo Dome.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Just like that big old Buster Douglas, the pride of Columbus, Ohio, the best puncher from Columbus before Jody Shelley came along.
Mm-hmm.
And there actually was a great, speak about Jody Shelley, there was a great feature article about him on The Athletic I saw. So I definitely recommend checking that out at some point for those who have not read it. Mike, you want to go ahead with your next question there?
Let's see. Oh, yeah. So pretty much you've had this coaching change that happened about like a year ago to John Hines from Peter Laviolette. Mm-hmm. And realistically, you haven't had like a full season just because last season was cut short, and then you pretty much had to jump into the playoffs and then come into this season with no like training camp or anything. But in the little bit that you've seen from him, how have you seen this team now with Hines versus when you had Laviolette running the team as a head coach?
Peter Laviolette is always thinking offense. John Hines is at the other end of the rink more. And I think he also simplified the team's defensive zone coverage. And because going down the stretch with Peter Laviolette, and here's analytics again, but I think the high danger scoring chances against either goaltender, whether it be Pecorino or UC Saros, were much higher under Peter Laviolette because we were playing a zone defensive scheme then. Now there are man-to-man. Now it's much more zone. Take care of an area here if you can. And I think that has reduced things quite a bit. But I guess you'd say you can't see that so much from results at this point of the schedule.
Right. I get that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, and I think that's definitely fair to say. And, speaking about again the record, you mentioned it. It's below 500. They're currently 6-9-0. They're 7th in the Central. Yeah. What do you personally think? For the best of, that you're able to tell us, what do you think needs to change in order for the Predators to get back into the running for a playoff spot?
To be much more effective offensively than they have been, and I really think that would also help the defense. If you could, this team has not had a lead going to the third period yet this season.
Wow,
that's hard to fathom after this many games, and this
it really is.
So that is, and they've had poor starts. They've had, I even joked with Coach Hines the other morning. I said, "Are you just going to tell the guys that as the game begins, it's the third period, so have that obvious sense of urgency that you have displayed in the third periods and these comebacks?" And he said, "Yeah, I wish I could get that across."
Yeah, and again, I think it also comes down to, like you mentioned and talked about a little bit earlier there, Pete, the fact that there are so many key players like Ryan Johansson, Matthias Ekholm, Brad Richardson, Matthew Olivier, and on the IR and key depth players and just key players like that in your lineup, and they're out for some time. That obviously doesn't help, and hopefully once they come back in the lineup, that will make a better impact.
Yeah, with that, I think we've learned the intelligence of the league starting out with the taxi squads. So you had a much larger roster from which to work and move guys in or move guys out. And that has helped, I think, tremendously.
Do you think it kind of hurt that you didn't have a preseason or like a preseason game or off or like that kind of training camp before the season started, like before jumping into it? Or do you think it would have still had maybe the same potential result?
I think probably the same. But it's all theoretical, all hypothetical.
Right,
we can't really tell. And nobody else had it either. Actually, the teams I'm sorriest for are, because we rushed into the schedule, were the 7 teams that did not play postseason series last year, who were supposed to have an additional week of camp.
Yeah.
And I think they got an additional 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
So coming back from no in-game activity since the middle of March to that is really jumping on a moving train.
Right.
I think that's the understatement of the year right there.
Yeah.
That must have been tough.
Yeah.
Mike, do you have any other quick questions here for Pete?
Not really. My only other thing was that maybe just with John Hines, just on that blue line, maybe that helps with your coaching, because I felt like since your cup run, you've had maybe one of the better blue lines in all of hockey. And I feel like, is that potentially a way, and as well as offensively, that can get your guys going again to maybe get your results in your favor versus what you've seen so far?
Yeah, because aside from Philip Forsberg, most of the offense has been generated from the blue line.
Really?
And and Roman Josi, I don't know how he does it. Okay, he was Norris Trophy winner, so we have to acknowledge that this last year. But he gets up ice. Excuse me. He will go behind the other team's net at least 2 or 3 times a game and still not get caught up ice. Somehow or another, he gets back. How he does it, I don't know, other than tremendous speed and also probably the instinct to as to when to get back,
Right.
Which I think is very much a big part of his being. So that is that would be nice, yes.
Right. Or maybe make sure you don't have so much pressure on your defense, so by the end of the game, it's not so much on them.
Right.
Because
right. Their minutes are high, shall we say, very intense minutes,
right.
as opposed to, say, to someone playing on the third and fourth lines who can go full out during their period of time. Whereas when we get to the third period, Roman Josi has already been going full out for much of the game.
Yeah, and that's certainly, you know, if you got all of that going for you, then hopefully, you know, you guys can see more positive results.
Yes.
But again, as we know, hockey is a team sport. And my final quick question here for you here, Pete, is and I hate to go this whole interview without getting to know more about the first round pick of the 2020 NHL draft for the Nashville Predators. I'm sure Predators fans everywhere are dying to hear more about Yaroslav Askarov, who had a little bit of a rough World Juniors. He definitely did show his flexibility and his athleticism. Speaking more about him, though, so he, again, was selected 11th overall to remind people in the 2020 NHL draft. He became just the 14th goalie in NHL history to get drafted in the first round. How soon do you think Askarov will play in the NHL? And do you think Pekka Rinne will still be around by the time he breaks into the NHL?
That latter might be the best question of them all, because Pekka's contract runs out this season.
Yeah.
But it seems to me, from listening to General Manager David Poyle, he would like to re-sign Pekka. And that might be a good insurance policy for an Askarov coming in. And really, I think in the World Juniors, he only had one bad game, one off game.
Yeah.
And I think we can allow him that.
He's still young. He's still developing. So
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he's, 18, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Doesn't it seem now like the goaltending has moved from Quebec to Finland and now east to Russia? That's kind of like where the camp and development of goaltenders have gone. As long as you are a minimum 6'2", I don't think. And Pekka, of course, is gargantuan. And when at one point in time, the Predators had like 13 feet of goaltender available to them. No longer, UC Saros does not exactly add up to 13 feet with Pekka. But scouts don't seem to even want to look at a goaltender smaller than 6 feet 2 inches tall, or shall we say somewhere along the lines of 1.9 meters. Look at it that way. That is the development on the shall we say the findings of goaltenders. And excuse me for various device noises here, but the findings here are that such that Askarov was a surprise to many. But I also always know that, because Pekka's last year of his contract was coming up, that if they had what they considered at 11, a true blue chip prospect, that they might indeed go there. I'm not too sure what his contractual situation is now in Russia, if he has one more year there or not. But even if he does have one more year, that potentially can be negotiated away.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, as we all know, in Russia specifically, it can be very, very difficult to get a highly talented Russian player, over there to the United States. So hopefully,
not as difficult as it was when I was with the Sabres in '89, and Don Luce was risking his life driving around to get Alex McGillney.
I was just going to say, you were there during the McGillney situation.
Oh yeah. Matter of fact, back then they even thought his name was Mogilny. So that's that's the way they were. I could send you audio of his opening press conference, and Jerry Meehan was the general manager at the time, and how happy they were to be able to get him out of there. And there was a great NHL Network documentary on that whole thing that ran last year. Tremendous story. And then Alex comes over, and he is afraid to fly, and in the NHL, and so. Ironically enough, where does he end up as a general manager in the KHL? An 8-hour flight away from Moscow as he goes over in Siberia. So,
wow.
But the Sabres had to get drivers for him to go to the northeastern cities for a while until they could, break that fear of his.
Yeah.
And obviously, I think it's broken now.
Right.
Yeah. I think that's certainly fair to say, Pete. Well, again, thank you so much for jumping on our podcast today. This has been Pete Weber.
Yeah.
And by the way, he was the 2019 NSMA, the National Sports Media Association Tennessee Sportscaster of the Year. How does it feel to have that honor?
To be here and having moved in here in the late 90s, where football dominates and has dominated for many years, to have a hockey guy do it, that in itself, to me, is a tremendous honor.
There you go.
Well, there you go. Very well said, Pete. Again, thank you so much for jumping on our podcast today. It's been a true pleasure.
And I hope you have good weather where you guys are right now. You're not in any winter peril, are you?
Not at the moment.
Not that I know of.
At the moment. Good answer.
Who knows?
At the moment.
But having been 20 years in Buffalo, I know what it's like.
Right.
Well, again, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Stay safe, and we'll be listening to your broadcast soon.
Yes. Thank you very much. And in pencil, I will be on the air again Thursday night from Nashville, calling a game from Columbus.
All right. And with that,
that has been Pete Weber of the Nashville Predators. Thank you, Pete.
Thank you, Pete.
You're most welcome, gentlemen.
All right.